Hello.
So,
Hello.
hello.
Good morning. I apologize because we have no left screen here. My controls are like doing all kinds of stuff, so I've called for assistance, but we're stuck with this right now. Hopefully, if you can't see it well, you have the presentation. Okay? And you guys know this material is not on the exam. The reason this material is not on the exam, one, it's very close to the exam date. Two, this is very complicated material. As you'll see, if you guys have been over coagulation before, you know it's pretty tough stuff. There's just a lot of nomenclature. So, anyway, so this will be on Monday. A week from today, I'm going to have a quiz over this stuff, specifically over this stuff. I'm thinking it'll be 10 to 16 points. I haven't figured out the exact number of points on the quiz, but so what's going to happen is Dr. Housknecht is lecturing Friday. She's going to lecture most of Monday, but there'll be about a 20-minute quiz on Monday covering specifically this stuff. Okay, so we have it so that hopefully you'll have plenty of time to learn all the other material for the exam, and then this will be added on. So, you know, my goal is to give you guys the best chance to learn this stuff so that when I assess it, you know, you're on level footing, as it were. Okay, if you have questions prior to the exam, anything you need to know, you're unsure of course, you can always email me, or you can try and pin me down in my office. Emailing me tends to work a little better because I've been running a lot between my office and the lab. So, but I will be sure and get back to you. Okay, we all set? How was the trip to wherever? It was good. So you decided Biogen. So you decided to be a research scientist now.
Thinking about it.
Thinking about it? Come visit.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Coagulation, anticoagulants, and thrombolytic and antiplatelet agents. A long thing to say. So the reference and reading is chapter 54. Actually, that might be wrong. Chapter 54. I think that's not the right chapter. But you can find the chapter, I'm certain, if you wish to read Goodman and Gilman, for the one of you or two of you that actually reads Goodman and Gilman. Again, I'm glad we have a fairly decent attendance today because this stuff is complicated. And as I go through this lecture, you know, you're going to see factor 5, 7, 10, 13, 12, blah, blah, blah. Right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to try my best to circle and emphasize the factors and the enzymes, et cetera, that I want you to know. Okay, so I'm going to try my best to focus you in on what I think you need to know coagulation, so that when we get to the drugs near the end of the lecture, you know how the drugs work. Okay, so you know the pharmacology of the drugs. So I'll try my best to really pinpoint what you need to know, so that you don't get bogged down with all the nomenclature and all the cascades and everything. That would be nice to know, but we just don't really have time for that. Okay, a little bit of an overview of hemostasis. Hemostasis, of course, is the stoppage of blood from a damaged vessel. Following injury, there's a rapid vasospasm response that occurs, so you cut yourself or whatever. So, and what goes on after an injury like that is, first thing that's going to happen are platelets are going to be activated. They're going to adhere to macromolecules in the subendothelial regions of injured blood vessels, and they're going to clump together, aggregate to form the primary hemostatic plug. And you know, we've all cut ourselves some way, shape, or form. And remember, you know what happens at first? Initially, you get a cut, and then you get that goopy kind of thing going on, and then you cut, and those are your platelets forming a plug. Okay, kind of going to stop that bleeding initially before the rest of the process starts, and you know, the total healing of the tissue occurs. Okay. Platelets then, they form that hemostatic plug, and then they're going to start signaling each other and other parts of the body to stimulate the activation, bless you, of coagulation factors. Okay? And these coagulation factors are going to drive the generation of a fibrin clot, and that platelets are going to reinforce. And so this fibrin clot, you're going to have fibrin that then gets cross-linked, the wound is going to get healed, and then what's going to happen is the wound heals, the rest of the stuff your body wants to get rid of, right? The scab, essentially getting rid of the scab, right? So then there's a series of events that occur to degrade the fibrin clot, et cetera, and just leave the healed tissue. Okay, and there's lots of targets for drugs and what's going on in these events, and so that's what we'll try and cover today. Okay, here's a, I'm not going to go over this slide, thank goodness for all of us, but here's kind of a one way to look at hemostasis, and I have lots of figures in this lecture, so like a lot of my lectures, there's verbiage, etc. But if you go to the pictures and walk yourself through the pictures, then I think that's perhaps the best way for you to understand what's going on. Okay, so in terms of hemostasis factors and enzymes, what happens is you get a series of what are called zymogen activation reactions occur during coagulation. And at each stage, a zymogen, which is a precursor protein or a factor, coagulation factor, is converted to an active protease. That gets done by the cleavage of one or more peptide bonds. And then what happens with each coagulation stage is you get the actions of a protease from the preceding stage, a zymogen, a non-enzymatic protein factor, calcium, etc. All these are interacting with a thrombus organizing surface provided by platelets to start the wound healing event to occur. Okay, zymogens involving coagulation include, and I'm going to just start telling you which ones you need to know now. Prothrombin. You guys heard of prothrombin before? Mm-hmm. Factor 2, you know this. Okay, so I don't need to do this lecture then, right? I'll run away. Prothrombin, very important. Prothrombin gets activated into thrombin. And remember what thrombin does? Okay, we'll get there. Fibrinogen to fibrin. Okay, thrombin is involved in that conversion. Okay, factors 7, 9, 10, 11, 12. You're going to definitely want to know factor 10. Okay, so factor 10 is involved in converting prothrombin to thrombin. So as we go down the slides here and through them, keep factor 10 in mind as something you want to know a little bit anyway about the activity of factor 10. And then there's also prekallikrein and other factors and zymogens that are involved in coagulation. I'm going to try and focus on the really important ones here. Okay. There are also non-enzymatic protein cofactors involved in coagulation, including factor 5, factor 8, and these are homologous proteins that they're essentially they're not active so much themselves that they're cofactors. I'm not going to really say a whole lot about those guys. Okay, so now we're going to go into the pathways for wound healing, extrinsic and intrinsic pathway. All I'm going to really say about this slide, other than if you can walk yourself through this slide and know the steps, then you'll know coagulation well. But we have an extrinsic or tissue factor pathway involved in healing and an intrinsic pathway involved as well. We're going to go through both of these. Okay, so prothrombin is factor 2, right? It's the final protease in the cascade for hemostasis. It's activated to thrombin by factor 10A. So when we get to the prothrombin being activated to thrombin, we've already had a series of steps that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, or already occurred in terms of healing. So we need factor 10A. When this factor is activated, it's going to be involved in activating prothrombin to thrombin. Thrombin then is going to convert fibrinogen to fibrin by cleaving these fibrinopeptides. Okay, so big thing here again is you've got fibrinogen, right? So fibrinogen's out here. you get prothrombin when the coagulation series of steps has been activated. You get down to this kind of key step here where prothrombin gets activated to thrombin, and then thrombin is going to be involved in cleaving fibrinogen, right, to fibrin. So here, this guy's thrombin here cleaves fibrinogen to fibrin. And these fibrin fibers are what are used to heal the wound, right? So then other factors are going to stimulate the cross-linking of those fibers to heal the wound. So you definitely need to know, again, prothrombin to thrombin and factor 10A, because those are all targets of drugs. Okay, other factors, once you've got thrombin activated, you've got fibrinogen cleaved to fibrin. Other factors are then going to stimulate the formation of cross-links between fibrin. Those fibrin monomers initially get bound by non-covalent bonds, but then you get this factor 13A that catalyzes an interchain reaction, so you get transglutamination that cross-links these fibrin monomers, and so you've got a strengthened clot. Okay, so really big picture for us, though, again, trying to get you guys focused into what I think you really, really need to know is you've got prothrombin has been, here you've got activated thrombin, 2A, right? That, again, cleaves fibrinogen to fibrin, right? And then the fibrin, you've got other factors involved in stimulating that cross-linking. Okay, but it's key. You don't get that cross-linking or anything until fibrinogen gets converted to fibrin. Okay, so that's really, really briefly the intrinsic pathway. The extrinsic or tissue factor pathway also essentially has same end result as the other pathway. This tissue factor pathway, and you need to know what tissue factor is when you're studying. Okay, tissue factor pathway. Tissue factor itself is a non-enzymatic lipoprotein cofactor. What it does is it increases the proteolytic actions of other factors like 7A, and ultimately, you want to know tissue factor, its activity are going to increase the activation of factor 10 to 10A. Okay, so you get the tissue factor pathway activated. Ultimately, you're going to get the conversion of 10 to 10A, and what does 10A do? Factor 10A is super important. It converts prothrombin to thrombin, okay? And without that happening, you're not going to get a wound to heal. Okay, and actually I said that here. 10A activates thrombin, which initiates conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin. Okay, so this slide shows the intrinsic pathway, extrinsic pathway. Again, going over this, and you can't teach this in 10 minutes, but we're trying. The intrinsic pathway, so you've got a damaged surface here, right? Damaged surface, for our purposes, right now, you need to know a series of steps occur, right? A series of zymogens are activated that is going to result in the activation of factor 10, 10A. 10A is involved in converting prothrombin to thrombin, which then cleaves fibrinogen to fibrin, which then fibrin strands get in to where the wound is, and they're cross-linked, and that's how the wound healing occurs, right? So again, intrinsic pathway, a series of steps results in the activation of factor 10. So in 10A, that A just means activated, right? That causes the conversion of prothrombin to thrombin. Again, thrombin then is going to convert fibrinogen to fibrin, and you're going to get the clot to start forming. Tissue factor, the tissue factor pathway over here. Essentially, you're getting the same thing. You have these other factors activated along with tissue factor, and down the road, ultimately with tissue factor, you're getting the same event to occur. You're getting this factor 10 activated and the same sort of thing. So a couple of different ways to get factor 10 activated: convert prothrombin to thrombin, and fibrinogen to fibrin, and then get the wound healing started. And you're gonna just have to sit down and study this stuff by yourself, okay, to understand it. you know, and that's, I don't think I'm asking you to understand it at too deep of a level there. There's just a series of steps you need to know. Okay, and as you'll see in a few minutes when we get to the drugs, it's very useful to know that, because without knowing that, you don't really know how the drugs work. Okay, so this slide is just in here for you to walk yourself through if you want to. It just shows this in a different way. It's a Goodman and Gilman slide. Okay, key thing is now we've gotten to the point where we've generated a clot, right? And it took us 15 minutes to generate the clot, and now we're going to get rid of the clot in about 5 minutes. Okay, so obviously once tissue healing has occurred, blood clot is formed, and then the tissue heals, you want to get rid of that that extra stuff, the clot, etc. You want to get rid of it, and in particular, though, you don't want it floating around in your bloodstream where it can cause all kinds of problems, right? So you don't want to, you know, somebody to have a thrombosis type issue where those clots then, instead of getting degraded, they break off and cause issues, stroke, or what have you. Okay, and so it's the fibrinolytic system that removes unwanted thrombi. It doesn't actually remove the fibrin from the wound, so it degrades the clot. And the big thing to know about the fibrinolysis and thrombolysis, a big player is plasminogen, which is the precursor protein to plasmin, which is the big molecule that's involved in getting rid of dissolving clots, okay? So plasmin is what starts to break down clots, okay? And plasmin gets activated by TPA, tissue plasminogen activator. TPA is what converts plasminogen to plasmin. Okay, and once that happens, the destruction of the clot begins. And there's drugs out there that act like TPA to help stimulate the conversion of plasminogen to plasmin, and those are given when people form clots and their body's not getting rid of the clots properly. Okay, so what happens with plasmin is it's going to stimulate the fibrinolytic system to dissolve intravascular clots. Obviously very important. It's an enzyme that digests fibrin. It's a non-specific enzyme which could cause problems, but fortunately the body takes care of this issue. So plasmin, again, is non-specific, right? And it also digests fibrin clots and other proteins that are coagulation factors. Big thing with plasmin is when it's fibrin bound, it is protected from inhibition. So when plasmin is in a wound and it's helping dissolve that clot, get rid of that clot, right? It's safe. You know, the body's not going to inactivate plasmin. But when it breaks away, and so you got plasmin, you don't want plasmin just floating in your circulatory system. So when it breaks away, it actually gets inhibited in the bloodstream by alpha-2 antiplasmin. So that keeps inappropriate fibrinolysis from occurring. Okay? Which is, you know, so you don't want, for instance, excessive bleeding would occur if you didn't have that alpha-2 antiplasmin inactivating any free plasmin that's floating around in the bloodstream. Okay, in real simple terms, I said I was going to get the wound healed, or the clot dissolved in 5 minutes. I'm pretty close. So this slide is a good one for just the very basics of fibrinolysis. Okay, you got tissue plasminogen activator, TPA. Again, that's going to convert plasminogen to plasmin. Okay, and the plasmin at the level of the clot is then going to start dissolving the clot. I've got a little pair of scissors here. That's not what it looks like. So, okay, although I may be in med chem, that is what it looks like. I'm not a chemist. So anyway, so that dissolves the clot. And again, if this plasmin were to float off free and get into the bloodstream, this alpha-2 antiplasmin is going to inhibit it, okay, and stop it from inappropriately cleaving the proteins and other stuff you don't want it to. Okay, so plasminogen factors are sometimes given for thrombolytic therapy, and of course, if somebody's got a clot, not getting rid of a clot, you can give plasminogen factors to try and initiate fibrinolysis. And so what happens with thrombolytic therapy drugs is they usually dissolve pathological thrombi, so you've got these clots that your body hasn't gotten rid of like it should, and so you can use this thrombolytic therapy to get rid of those. and also fibrin deposits. So, one big problem, of course, is, and why these drugs, among other things, why these drugs have to be monitored so closely when somebody's having this kind of therapy, is they can get inappropriate hemorrhage to occur. So, you're stopping your body's normal clotting system, you're stimulating your body's clotting system. If you overstimulate that, you're not going to have, the clots aren't going to form like you want them to form normally. I think I said that right. Okay, the body does have some natural anticoagulant mechanisms because, as I'm sure you would know, keeping inappropriate platelet activation and coagulation from occurring is important. So you don't want your body to inappropriately make these big clots in blood vessels overreact, and then if you get a clot in a blood vessel that then breaks free, it can go, for instance, it can go to your lungs and cause problems. It can go to your brain, and block blood flow to the brain, and then you have a stroke and all that. So obviously, keeping that system working normally is very important for your health. So thrombosis is prevented by a number of regulatory mechanisms that are just endogenous mechanisms. Prostacyclin inhibits platelet aggregation, and we're going to go over the production of prostacyclin in about a week when we talk about eicosanoids. Okay, antithrombin, which is a drug target. You absolutely have to know antithrombin. Antithrombin is involved in inhibiting coagulation factors, and in particular heparin, you guys have, I'm sure, already heard of in your lives. Heparin, anticoagulant. Heparin stimulates antithrombin activity. So what heparin is doing is it's stimulating the inhibition of coagulation factors, okay, to stop inappropriate coagulation. Okay, then there's protein C that degrades those cofactors 5 and 7 that are, again, involved in helping generate clots. So protein C does that, and by degrading those two factors, you're going to inhibit the activation of prothrombin by factor 10. Okay, then the tissue factor pathway inhibitor is another pathway that binds and inhibits factor 10A, and then this 7A and tissue factor complex. Really big picture for us, though. Tissue factor pathway inhibitor is going to inhibit tissue factor pathway. Again, big step in tissue factor pathway, as well as the other pathway is to activate 10A. This is going to stop that, right? So you inactivate 10A, you're going to stop the conversion of prothrombin to thrombin, and if you stop that, then you're stopping the conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin. Okay. Half the reason I said that was I was a little worried I wasn't going to keep it straight because these things get very difficult. Okay, so again, I highly encourage you guys to read through it and just think yourself through that, all those factors and everything, and focus on the ones I told you to focus on. So that's what I'm going to test on. But I think it's key as pharmacists. There's all kinds of people out there that are on some kind of anticoagulant therapy, and we've all seen about 1 million Plavix commercials, right? That sort of thing. So knowing how these things work is, I think, important for your future. And my future, when I come in and I'm an old man and I've got coagulation problems, and I come into your pharmacy and ask you, hey, how does this drug really work? What's its mechanism of action? Obviously, you want to be able to tell me the right answer, right? Okay, maybe not. Silence. All right. Which color is Buttercup? Green. Buttercup is green. I took down my link to Buttercup because I thought I'd better not force people to watch that awesome video. Anybody see that awesome video? A couple people. How rocking out to Buttercup, that's like the best thing in the world. No, my teaching evaluations just took another dive. Okay, heparin. You guys need to know how heparin works. Heparin is, again, back up here, parenteral anticoagulant agent. So What defines a parenteral agent?
Not oral.
What's that?
Not oral.
Not oral. That's right. So heparin is not given orally. Okay. So heparin is made naturally, right? It's made endogenously. It's a glycosaminoglycan that gets stored in mast cell granules, and it has a precursor that I'm not going to really get into right now, so we'll just skip that line there. So what heparin does is it catalyzes the inhibition, keyword here, catalyzes inhibition of several coagulation proteases by antithrombin. So essentially, heparin makes antithrombin work better to inhibit coagulation factors. Okay, so and you're gonna through antithrombin, stimulating antithrombin activity, you're gonna inhibit coagulation factors like thrombin itself, also 10A, so you're gonna block the conversion of prothrombin to thrombin, and then these other agents, these other coagulation factors as well. Okay, and again, bottom line, key point, low molecular weight heparin works mainly by stimulating the inhibition of 10A by antithrombin. Okay, and this slide shows, in pretty simple terms, I think, here antithrombin. So in this slide we've got, do I have this animated? Whoops, no I don't. Okay, so in this slide we have your tissue factor and the clotting factors have been activated. So there's been a wound. Key point is once there's been a wound and all these coagulation factors are activated, going on, you're going to get activation of that factor 10, which is going to, in conjunction with some other factors that I'm not going to really talk about, factor 10 is going to, again, be involved in the conversion of prothrombin to thrombin. Antithrombin is going to inhibit the actions of thrombin. It's also going to, and it's not on this slide, inhibit the actions of factor 10A. Oh, that looks awful. Sorry. So anyway, I've also, protein C is another agent that is also involved in inhibiting coagulation factors. I'm not going to really talk about it, but you should at least remember protein C is also an endogenous anticoagulant factor. Okay. Heparin, in terms of heparin's uses, it's used to initiate treatment of venous thrombosis, pulmonary embolism. It actually can also be used for unstable angina. Yeah, why do you think it would be used for that? And I'm not a clinician, but I'm just thinking, well, you don't want a bunch of scarring of the heart, right? So you reduce the amount of scarring at the heart, you know, and so among other things, you reduce the scarring, et cetera, at the level of the heart, then you're not going to have tissue damage there that among other things is going to cause like re-entry arrhythmias and stuff like that. Okay, okay, so it can be used for acute myocardial infarction during and after coronary angioplasty or stent placement. So essentially any time you don't want coagulation to occur, too much coagulation, you want to limit the formation of clots because they're not going to be helpful. And that's when you're going to give heparin and give it IV. Okay, heparin doesn't last too long when you give it, so the anticoagulant effect of heparin ceases within a few hours after discontinuation. However, and with any of these anticoagulants, the really big thing you need to remember is that a potential problem and something you have to be aware of and look out for is excessive bleeding. So, and this can happen to up to 5% of people who are getting this stuff IV. Of course, if somebody screws up and gives a bigger dose than they're supposed to, then have problems as well. You can try and reverse heparin if you've got issues with heparin. You can give things like protamine, which are arginine-rich proteins, can be used to try and reverse the actions of heparin in cases of excessive bleeding. Mild bleeding, because the heparin isn't going to last that long, usually isn't going to be a huge issue. Okay, and then also heparin can induce thrombocytopenia. Happens rarely though, which is where you get antibodies against the heparin platelet factor form. And of course, when you've got this like autoimmune type issues going on there, of course you don't want that. Okay, heparin is typically given by IV. I've only seen it given IV, but apparently can be given subcutaneous injection. The slide just shows some different variations, different names of commercially available heparin that are out there. And I'm not gonna read through those, but I bet I could pronounce them if I really wanted to. Okay. In terms of other parenteral anticoagulant agents that are out there, there's this. Guys know this drug? Lepirudin? Lepirudin. I don't know. Okay, this drug, spelled Lepirudin, is also a thrombin inhibitor that's out there. It's a derivative of an agent found in the saliva of leeches. Okay, and what this guy does is it binds the catalytic site of thrombin. So when you bind the catalytic site of thrombin, you're inhibiting the conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin, right? And then if you don't have fibrin, then wound healing, or creation of wounds, clots, etc., is not going to occur. Okay, and then there's bivalirudin is also another thrombin inhibitor that's out there, and that also is going to bind the catalytic site of thrombin. And then there's another one, and somehow I think I messed up my formatting. This is another drug. Argatroban is another drug that's a thrombin inhibitor. Okay. And then danoparoid is another parenteral anticoagulant that you may see, probably not, but you may. That stimulates the inhibition of factor 10A. And factor 10A stimulates the conversion of what? Prothrombin to thrombin. Okay? And I quiz you guys repeatedly on that, so when it comes to the actual quiz I give you, we're all going to get 100%, right? Or 11 if I ask some important, or 11 points, I mean 110% if I ask some stupid question about Powerpuff Girls. So I think I'm moving on from that. Okay, so then there's also another drug out there that is given IV, I can't pronounce that. So this drug here is a recombinant form of protein C. Protein C, again, is an endogenous agent that inhibits coagulation factors like 10. Okay, and in terms of asking questions about this stuff, I'll probably stick to asking heparin-specific question or two. Heparin stimulates antithrombin activity, essentially. And then if I'm going to ask a global question about those other drugs, I'll call them parenteral anticoagulant agents, which, typically these guys, this one's not available in the U.S., but bless you, they're going to get in it and block that thrombin catalytic site, so that the site on thrombin that's involved in converting fibrinogen to fibrin. Okay, and so these other guys, which are available, do the same thing. All right, up next, oral anticoagulant agents. But first, what do you guys know about vitamin K? Nothing? Okay. You need to know something about vitamin K. We're not talking ketamine, right? We're not. This is the rave thing going on here. So vitamin K is essential for both mammals and photosynthetic organisms. Vitamin K is provided in the diet by green plants. And the reason this gets emphasized in these next several slides is somebody's taking anticoagulant therapy, oral anticoagulants. If they're eating too many leafy greens, in particular dark leafy greens, they increase the amount of their vitamin K, and that actually overrides the effects of anticoagulants. So you may already know, somebody on anticoagulant therapy, you tell them, don't have a diet of leafy greens entirely, because they'll have too much vitamin K, and we're going to go through what vitamin K does. Too much vitamin K is not helpful for anticoagulant therapy. So what vitamin K is it's necessary for the formation of gamma carboxyglutamate residues. What these guys do is they permit clotting factor interactions with calcium membrane phospholipids and modulator proteins. So essentially, they're involved in activating these coagulation factors. I'm going to really simplify this. Involved in activating these coagulation factors. So drugs like Coumadin, have you guys heard of Warfarin, Coumadin, right? And you know, there's like Coumadin clinics out there, etc. So these are important drugs that you need to know how they work. So what these Coumadin derivatives do is they block the formation of carboxyglutamate, which is stimulated by vitamin K. Okay, so essentially you can think of things like Coumadin as vitamin K antagonists. It's, you know, a little more sophisticated than that, but that is one way to think of them. So, and what that means though is vitamin K itself can be used therapeutically to treat bleeding or hemorrhage associated with low vitamin K. So vitamin K stimulates coagulation, right? Somebody doesn't have enough vitamin K in their body, you know, they'll bleed very easily, you know, bruise and bleed very easily. So one way to stimulate and increase the effectiveness of your body's coagulation system is to give somebody vitamin K. Okay, vitamin K is also, it's of course from the diet, needs to be absorbed. When bile levels are low or absent, vitamin K is poorly absorbed, and so insufficient vitamin K levels, again, not good. Somebody doesn't have enough vitamin K. Are they going to clot too easy or are they going to bleed too easy? They're going to bleed too easy, right? Not enough vitamin K, coagulation factors aren't stimulated properly, they're going to bleed too easy. Sorry, Nick, I just...
That's good.
Okay, so inadequate vitamin, and so this can happen, and since a lot of these coagulation factors, a lot of this stuff is occurring at the level of the liver, somebody has liver issues, so you know they have intrahepatic or extrahepatic biliary obstruction, or you know liver dysfunction, then their vitamin K is not going to be able to stimulate coagulation factors as well as it could. Okay, and inadequate vitamin K utilization again can also be the result of hepatocellular disease or damage. So it also tells you, you know, if somebody's like a chronic alcoholic, that sort of thing, they might also bleed very easily because their liver isn't utilizing vitamin K properly. Okay, in terms of vitamin K, you got to know it. It's in particular because it's the target of warfarin, which is a competitive antagonist of vitamin K. And so when you antagonize vitamin K, again, you interfere with the production of glutamate-containing clotting factors. So you're stopping the activation of clotting factors. And if for some reason somebody's been given too much warfarin, what have you, you can actually combat that by giving them vitamin K itself as phylloquinone. Okay, that moves us into warfarin. Warfarin is 4-hydroxycoumarin. It's an anticoagulant, which you guys have heard of. Again, this antagonizes the actions of vitamin K. There's a little information on this slide that I've already gone over. More specifically, how warfarin works is it inhibits vitamin K epoxide reductase, which is the enzyme responsible for regenerating the reduced form of vitamin K from the oxidized form. So essentially, this vitamin K epoxide reductase, you can think of it as it activates vitamin K, so then vitamin K can, you know, be involved in the activation of clotting factors. Okay, so in terms of therapeutic doses, what's going to happen? You give somebody warfarin inhibits vitamin K, so you're going to decrease the vitamin K activation of coagulation factors or production of coagulation factors by the liver by 30 to 50%. So with warfarin, you're reducing the production of coagulation factors. Okay, and those coagulation factors that are made don't work as well because they're under thromboxylated. Okay, trying to keep this simple here. And again, if somebody is given too much warfarin, then you can overcome this by giving them vitamin K. this slide goes over clinical uses in the, I'm not going to test over this stuff because I'm obviously not a clinician, but it's here, and in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the clinical uses. But you're going to learn this, I guarantee you're going to learn this in therapeutics. Vitamin K needs to be monitored. I mean, vitamin K. Warfarin needs to be monitored very carefully. Okay, this slide shows the warfarin mechanism of action. Okay, and I actually animated this slide. So here we have warfarin down here. And here I've written this action ultimately stops. So the activation, here's inactive vitamin K, here's active vitamin K. Warfarin blocks that activation, right? So this action is going to ultimately stop or inhibit the production of these coagulation factors, the proper production of these coagulation factors, right? Okay. Everybody got that? Okay. So in terms of warfarin, again, this is a tricky drug. That's and other anticoagulant agents you need to know are affected by a large number of other pharmaceutical agents. So that there's a long list of drugs that can interfere with warfarin activity. And when used with any anticoagulant, substances can be dangerous if they are going to block the normal uptake of vitamin K. You know, so you can overdo a drug can work too effectively because you're balancing the actions of the drug you're given, like warfarin, and the actions of vitamin K that's being taken in. So the synthesis, function, or clearance of any factor or cell that's involved in fibrinolysis or epithelial cell surface integrity. So there's a lot of ways to mess with proper anticoagulant activity. One thing that I'm going to ask that you know, probably test on, is that agents that induce this liver enzyme CYP2C9 enzymes, and there's a lot of agents out there that increase this particular liver enzyme. They increase the breakdown of anticoagulants like warfarin. So you got to be careful when these drugs get used. Of course, you're going to use that in therapeutics, and you're going to know that in therapeutics, but I'm just bringing it, I want you to try and remember that, so when you get to these lectures in therapeutics, you remember, why these liver enzymes, why you got to not be worried about them being stimulated by various drugs in terms of what it's going to do to warfarin activity. Okay, again, high dietary levels of vitamin K, since warfarin is a competitive antagonist, essentially, vitamin K, high levels of vitamin K can override warfarin and can also increase warfarin clearance. Okay, and then valproate and loop diuretics can cause problems with warfarin too, because they'll displace it from binding proteins and increase its effectiveness. Again, I'm going to expect you're going to go over that stuff in therapeutics a lot. Really big picture for pharmacology is know how know how warfarin works, antagonizes vitamin K activity, reduces the proper production of coagulation enzymes. Okay, warfarin resistance can occur in patients, and this is one reason why somebody's on warfarin. A lot of times this is linked to they got a diet that's high in leafy greens, so you're going to want to warn somebody who's taking Coumadin, warfarin, not to overdo that. Okay, and again, it's a real simple slide here. This slide shows warfarin mechanism of action. Again, we have that. We're going this way. Here's the inactive vitamin K. Here's the active vitamin K, and warfarin's blocking that step. You block that step, and you're blocking a series of activities here that are going to would normally make these coagulation factors. You're blocking the production of coagulation factors. Okay, so Goodman and Gilman list some other oral anticoagulants that get used that have limited use, so I'm just bringing it up in this slide. I'm not going to cover them here, but others do exist. We'll move on quickly to fibrinolytic agents, which are also considered anticoagulants. Okay, fibrinolytic agents include streptokinase and tissue plasminogen activator, TPA. What does TPA do? stimulates the conversion of plasminogen to plasmin. Plasmin breaks down fibrin. Okay, so streptokinase itself is a protein that's made by these beta hemolytic streptococci. So what it does is it forms a stable complex with plasminogen, exposing the active site of the fibrinolytic enzyme to form free plasmin. You know, so you're stimulating breakdown of clots this way. Streptokinase doesn't really get used, but it was one of the initial ones we bring it up. You can give a tissue plasminogen activator. That's a serine protease. And the big thing with TPA is it activates plasminogen in the presence of plasmin. Activate plasminogen, you get plasmin. Plasmin is going to break down the fibrin clots, right? Okay, this slide shows us in a real simple form. So TPA again is stimulating the conversion of plasminogen to plasmin. If plasmin is floating around in the blood, it's of course inhibited by alpha-2 antiplasmin. But if it's associated with fibrin, like here, this is activated with plasmin, and it's going to break that down. It's going to be allowed to do that. Streptokinase essentially got the same thing going on. You're stimulating plasmin activity. Okay, major toxicity associated with thrombolytic agents, of course, is going to be hemorrhage. Right? And that really involves two factors. You got fibrinolysis, the site of vascular injury, and then you can also get this lytic state caused by systemic formation of plasmin. So too much plasmin, you're going to have bleeding because it's going to be breaking down clots. Okay, antiplatelet agents. Aspirin is, of course, a main antiplatelet agent. You've probably heard of aspirin as an antiplatelet agent already. We're going to discuss aspirin and how it works in a week or two. Okay, when we go over icosanoids, arachidonic acid, metabolites. So what aspirin does, and we'll just skip straight to the mechanism of action. You guys heard of cyclooxygenase, right? Key enzyme in the cascade that produces like inflammatory factors, etc. So prostaglandin production, you guys heard prostaglandin. So aspirin inhibits cyclooxygenase activity. Again, I'm going to go over that in a week or two. Okay. So, and aspirin, by inhibiting that, is going to help inhibit platelet activity. Again, I'm going to leave the questions for that for later. Okay. Dipyramidol is a vasodilator that also gets used. Its mechanism of action is to interfere with platelet function by decreasing levels of cyclic AMP. I'm actually not going to ask questions about that. I'm just making you aware of it. Okay, ticlopidine is another antiplatelet agent that you actually want to be aware of. Ticlopidine is a prodrug that inhibits a purine receptor. And when you inhibit this purine receptor, then you're going to inhibit the ability of platelets to aggregate. Okay, inhibit the ability of platelets to aggregate. You're going to inhibit all kinds of stuff. You're going to inhibit their signaling each other, and signaling coagulation factors. You're going to inhibit the formation of plugs, etc. So, and what this guy does is it forms a permanent disulfide bridge with these purine receptors on platelets and inhibits their function. So, big picture for us, ticlopidine, prodrug that inhibits purine receptors on platelets and stops normal platelet function. Stop normal platelet function, you're not going to get normal coagulation function. Okay, Plavix, you guys have all heard of Plavix, right? This works in a similar way as ticlopidine, but actually has a better toxicity profile, so it gets used a lot. So again, what this drug is it's a purine receptor antagonist. It goes after purines on platelets, so it's inhibiting normal platelet activity, which is going to cause dysfunction in the normal coagulation cascade, and so you're not going to get normal coagulation. Okay. This slide in very simple form shows these drugs where they work. So up here, this is supposed to be a platelet here, and here's this purine receptor, right? So these guys block this purine receptor on platelets, and so you're not going to get normal platelet aggregation, etc. to occur. You don't have platelet aggregation, you're not going to get the formation of clots. Okay, another set of antiplatelet agents, I'm almost done here, that you need to be aware of are these glycoprotein 2B3A inhibitors. This glycoprotein 2B3A, this is different, okay, different from that platelet purine receptor. Okay, this is a different receptor. It's a heterodimer receptor found on platelets, and this, when it's normally activated, it acts as a fibrinogen and von Willebrand factor receptor. So it stimulates those guys, and so when you inhibit it, you're inhibiting fibrinogen production or fibrinogen activity. So, so when it's activated, it's going to anchor platelets to foreign surfaces and each other, right? And so it helps start the coagulation events to occur. And so when you inhibit this glycoprotein 2B3A receptor, you're going to blunt platelet aggregation induced by agonists like these endogenous molecules that stimulate platelet aggregation. Okay, so and a couple of these agents include abcoximab. It's an antibody against this glycoprotein 2B3A receptor, and then I can't pronounce this. Eptifibatide is another inhibitor of that receptor as well. And then tyrosine is a third, again, just basics for us, inhibitor of that receptor. So what happens is, again, when you inhibit this GP2B3A receptor, you're inhibiting platelet aggregation. So platelets aren't going to sit where they normally would, right? They're not going to aggregate together. You inhibit that, and you're inhibiting coagulation. Okay. I don't know about you, but I think that's super complicated stuff. But we got through it again. This is, you know, I kind of actually like having this as a set aside on its own thing to study, because it's going to be really important you understand these drugs. Okay, so test on Wednesday. Exam soft with essays.
Multiple choice.
Oh, I'm going to do a Scantron again. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Scantron. Scantron. And you know your grades are posted from the quiz.
Yes.
And that includes your extra credit.
Yeah.
Okay? I got some interesting extra credit. Who is the bad guy? Mojo Midger? Mojo what? Mojo Dojo? Okay, I learned all kinds of things from that.